Dr. Terry Wahls is a clinical professor of medicine at the University of Iowa, where she conducts clinical trials testing the effect of therapeutic diet and lifestyle to treat multiple sclerosis and related symptoms. Dr. Wahls is also a patient with secondary progressive multiple sclerosis, which confined her to a tilt recline wheelchair for 4 years. She restored her health using diet and lifestyle, and she designs this specifically for her brain, and now pedals her bike to work each day. She's the author of the Wahls Protocol, How I Beat Progressive MS Using Paleo Principles and Functional Medicine. Dr. Wahls travels the world lecturing about the healing power of diet and lifestyle for those with chronic autoimmune diseases. I've followed Dr. Terry Wahls for a number of years and find her story absolutely inspiring. It's an emotional tale that you'll learn on today's episode, along with the diet and lifestyle interventions that she uses with herself and clients. She's also conducting an amazing research study called The Efficacy of Diet on Quality of Life in Multiple Sclerosis. It's going to be a 24-month study, and it's open enrollment for patients between the ages of 18 and 70 years old. If you have MS or know someone who has MS, I definitely recommend her book, The Wahls Protocol. She also has a few courses online, one called Remyelination. That would be a great place to start if you can't get into her clinic. But definitely, if you know anyone with MS, this is the podcast to share with them. Thank you, Dr. Wahls, for being on the show today. It was an absolute pleasure. Well, Dr. Terry Wahls, I have been looking forward to this podcast for so long. You are the expert in MS. You personally suffered from it. You've healed your body through it. I've given your book, The Wahls Protocol, to so many friends, patients, and clients. And I couldn't wait to bring you on the show because, like we talked about before the show started, it feels like the number of people being diagnosed with MS is on the rise. There's been things published recently about a connection to Epstein-Barr. I'd love your take on that. I'd love to kind of just give everyone the 101 on MS, what it is, what's happening in the body, what's the breakdown, how do we heal or protect ourselves, and to really share that story that you share, which is the story of hope. So thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to dive into your story.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for the work that you're doing as well.
Oh, thanks. Well, let's start with your diagnosis and your personal journey. What were you first diagnosed with? What were some of the symptoms you were dealing with?
Sure.
And when did you identify that it was MS?
So what I'd like to do is just take a couple minutes to let your viewers hear this sort of in real time as it happened.
Okay.
So in 2000, I'm out walking with my wife, Jackie, a half mile from home. My left leg grows weak. Dragging it, I hobble home. I know this is terrible. A few days later, I see the neurologist who says, Terry, this could be bad or really, really bad. And we begin the workup. So for the next 3 weeks, I go through lots of tests. At night, I think about the 20 years of worsening electrical face pains that I've had. And I know that what I have must be progressive. I don't want to become disabled. So I'm praying secretly for a rapidly fatal diagnosis.
Wow.
3 weeks later, I hear multiple sclerosis. I'm a physician. I'm at the University of Iowa. I do my research. I find the very best MS center in the country. I do my research. I see their best physician. I take the newest drugs. 3 years later, I hear tilt, recline, wheelchair. My electrical face pains have been continue to get relentlessly worse. My 10-year-old daughter hugs me as tears stream down my face. And then I ask myself, am I really doing all that I can? I go back to reading the basic science, and I'm reading, all these animal studies. I decide mitochondria are the driver of disability in MS. And I designed a supplement cocktail to support my mitochondria. It does slow my decline. I'm very grateful, but I am still declining. I discover a study using electrical stimulation of muscles. I ask my physical therapist, can I try that? He says, it's called e-stim. It's for athletes. It's painful. But he does give me a test session, and he's right. It hurts like hell. But when it's over, I feel great. And we add e-stim to my physical therapy. Then I discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine. I take their course on neuroprotection, talks a lot about mitochondria, a lot of biochemistry. I have a longer list of supplements. Now, keep in mind, I've already been following the paleo diet for 5 years. I've been in the recline wheelchair for 4 years. I cannot sit up. I'm in a zero gravity chair with my knees higher than my nose. That's how I staff the residents in my clinic. That's how I am at home. That's how I eat my meals. And then I have this interesting aha, and I'm actually quite embarrassed by how long it took me to have this aha. Like, what if I redesign my paleo diet based on the nutrients I'm taking in supplement form? And I figure out where they are in the food supply. More research takes me a few more months. In December 26th, I start this new way of eating, 2007. I have relentlessly worsening face pain. I have brain fog. I cannot sit up anymore. I can walk a few steps with 2 walking sticks. Otherwise, I'm in that tilt recline wheelchair. I have this new way of eating. 1 month later, it's clear that my fatigue is much less. My mental clarity is improving. 2 months later, my physical therapist says, "You're definitely stronger." He advances my exercises. And I begin walking with 2 walking sticks. And then I'm walking with 1 walking stick, then without any walking sticks. And then on and, and on Mother's Day, 2008, I want to try riding my bike. I haven't done that in 6 years. We have an emergency family meeting. My kids don't think I should ride. They don't want to risk my and get hurt. My wife, Jackie, tells my big 6'5" young son, who's 16, "You jog in the left. My 13-year-old daughter, you jog in the right, and I'll follow." And I push off. And I bike around the block. And that big 16-year-old boy, he's crying.
Oh my God.
That 13-year-old daughter, she's crying. Jackie's crying. And I cry even still talking about that.
Like a mess. Don't interview Terry Wahls pregnant.
Yeah, you'll cry.
Or probably not pregnant too. I'd cry, but yeah.
And then, I start biking a little more every day. And in October, Jackie says, "Let's sign you up for the Courage Ride. It's 18.5 miles.
I love your wife.
And once again, when I cross that finish line, everybody's crying. My kids are crying. Jackie's crying. I'm crying. And this fundamentally changes how I think about disease and health. It will change the way I practice medicine, and it will change the focus of my research. And, I started talking about food. I started talking about my experience with my patients. And it changed everything with how I took care of patients, and it would change the research. And we can go as you have more questions. But
Wow. I mean, your story has always been so inspiring to me, but hearing it firsthand, it is so emotional because you think about the quality of life. Like, what is it to live when you are bedbound, when you are stuck in a wheelchair, when you cannot be your most vibrant self, and when there is hope, when there is healing, when the body wants to heal and it wants you to ride 18 miles.
Our life exists because of self-correcting biochemistry that sort of has this, yin and yang of life, the recycling of chemical reactions that allow life to be sustained, that allows for repair of damaged tissues. And so, and I did all that. I rearranged my diet, my life, my supplements, the E-stem. Kelly, I didn't do that to heal. I did that to slow my decline because, I could still use my hands. I could still feed myself. I could still think clear enough to staff the residents. And I knew that secondary progressive MS is progressive, that my physicians, all of them, for the previous 7 years had said functions once lost, once you hit the progressive phase, never come back. And I knew I was in the progressive phase, so things weren't coming back. So I was doing all that I could to slow the decline. What's really interesting when you have progressive, it's any neurodegenerative disease that's progressive, one of the coping strategies is to let go of the future and just take each day as it unfolds. So, though over the winter and spring, I was walking better, being more functional, having much less pain, much more mental clarity. I didn't know what any of that meant because I let go of the future. I was just taking each day as it unfolded. But it was when I rode my bike around the block that, well, maybe recovery is possible. Like how close to normal could I get?
Yeah.
And what I want you to know and all your listeners to know is this morning I jogged, I jogged on my treadmill, 20 minutes. And then I'm watching my son's and his wife's dog. So then I went in the backyard and playing kickball with the dog, running around, doing all of that. And when I came in, my Aura ring said, "Well, you have overshot your activity goal for the day. Good for you."
Oh, that is just so inspiring and really, I mean, it is what you've always been, which is really hopeful and it changes the narrative for a lot of people with MS. But for people who don't know what MS is, can you explain what's happening in the body? What is MS? How is it diagnosed? What are some of the symptoms that people may experience? Yeah.
So it was first described in the 1800s. Someone had a neurologic problem. I believe there was a sensory disturbance and motor problems. And on autopsy, there were white lesions in the brain and spinal cord. And that was called multiple sclerosis for multiple scars in the nervous system. Now, we've since learned that there is an immune attack on the myelin that's in the brain and spinal cord. Initially, for most people, there are periods of either sensory or motor problems that happen. That's a relapse. Gradually improve. That's called remission. And then over a period of years, you have fewer attacks. And instead, there's just this relentless decline. And the transition to the relentless decline phase of the illness occurs in the 40s, sometime between age 45 and 50, most commonly, because that's when our immune system becomes less reactive in general. And the deterioration phase is what's predominant. We now know that that deterioration phase is happening from the beginning. So we have drugs that are really good at turning off the inflammation phase, reducing the relapses. But the drugs are not very good at stopping the deterioration phase. And so they are slowing the time from diagnosis to wheelchair to bedridden to profound cognitive decline. So they're adding about 5 years on average to those milestones. But they don't stop that. And I see I have some video that's having a little annoying problem, so I apologize for that.
That's okay. You're back to me clearly.
Okay. And, so a lot of the drug development has been focused on dealing with immune because of the relapses. And we thought that the immune was the big driver of disease. Then the functional medicine side, we've been talking about, well, yeah, immune's part of the problem, but the deterioration is another big part of the problem, and we should be addressing that as well. And my theories back from 2007 is this is a problem related to mitochondrial function. And so we have to take care of the mitochondria. We have to take care of nutrition. We have to take care of toxins and all of the environmental factors that I teach when I'm teaching for functional medicine and the other integrative conferences that I teach at.
Wow. So when we look at the drugs that are slowing, like squelching the inflammation and slowing the decline, they aren't stopping the deterioration. The deterioration is still happening. It's just slowing the progression and giving you an
Correct.
extra 5 years. So when you're, I would say, teaching people who have MS how you healed your body. You said that you looked at your diet and you looked at the nutrients that you were taking in supplement form and started to include
Yeah.
those through food, nutrient dense foods. Can we talk about
Yeah.
what kind of a diet, because you were doing a paleo diet for 5 years at this
Yeah.
point, what kind of a diet
Well,
specifically for MS is supporting this?
so I'm going to sort of walk people through the diets that I've had in my life. So,
I love
um,
that.
uh, standard American diet, grew up on a farm, plenty of meat and potatoes, vegetables. Then, being the rebellious teenager, I decided to quit eating meat, became a vegetarian. Then I went to medical school and like, oh, fat's a problem. So I became a very low fat vegetarian. Lots of beans, lots of rice, whole wheat bread. And so it would certainly look like a really great diet. But for me, it turned out not to be such a good diet. I remember my parents saying, Terry, you're killing yourself. You need meat. This vegetarian stuff is not good for you. Now, unfortunately, both my parents died before, I got introduced to Lauren Cordain, and, read his papers. So like, okay, I'll give it a try. And it was a big decision to go back to eating meat because I'd been 20 years a low-fat vegetarian.
Wow.
So big decision.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me about 6 months to get meat back into the diet. And I continued to decline. The next year, I needed the wheelchair. Um, and, so 4 years declining. I started adding supplements for my mitochondria. And I do figure out I feel much better on the supplements than off.
Mm-hmm.
It's not leading to recovery. The paleo diet does not lead to recovery. And all the paleo people, I love them. I love the paleo diet. It was not enough to recover me. I
Mm-hmm.
take supplements. I take a lot of supplements still. Supplements were not enough to recover.
Mm-hmm.
I discovered electrical stimulation. I love electrical stimulation, and it was sort of stabilizing things. But
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
What is really interesting is that when I looked at, I think I was up to 18 different ingredients that I was chasing in supplements at that time, somewhere between 10 and 18. And I said, where are they in the food supply? And that took me a few more months of research. And I had this list of foods that I needed to eat. And, I had this big aha. If I chase these nutrients, I'm probably going to get other molecules that are in that same food that are probably that we don't know to name or monitor or measure that are probably helpful to my chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And I started eating that way December 26, 2007. And by January 31st, 2008, I could sit up again. It was a big deal when I told my family I'd like to sit at the table in a regular chair.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat in my desk at work in a regular chair.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not feel like a big deal. Like, oh my God, that is a huge deal to sit at
Right.
your table with your family.
Right.
And then at the end of February, I'm walking in the hallway mailing a letter. And my physical therapist is like, yes, you're definitely stronger. And we're advancing my exercises. So there is something about the, the synergy with food that really accelerated my healing.
Mm-hmm.
That was quite profound. And, I dramatically increased, my greens. I was being very emphatic about getting liver.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing liver once a week. Found heart, and I was doing heart and oysters and shellfish. Uh, and that's when I made the commitment, like, it's all going to be organic,
Yeah.
or I'm not eating it.
Mm-hmm.
And I also went back to meditating.
Mm-hmm.
I'd meditated as an undergraduate. I quit during medical school. I have no idea why I quit. And even though I knew, I don't know why I didn't start going back to meditation earlier in my health journey. In
Hmm.
retrospect, like, oh my God, that clearly I should have. But it was that fall when I was like, okay, I got to meditate. It's if I'm eating the food, it's going to be organic. I don't care how expensive it is. Um, you know, that just became a priority for me, and it was shocking. I mean, it was just so shocking the difference 1 month of this eating this way made to my life. And so many folks want to say it was um, the paleo diet that fixed me, that it was supplements that fixed me, or functional medicine that fixed me. It was all of that,
Hmm.
and it was stunning that when I really took the question of, am I really doing all that I can, to heart? It's like, okay, my diet. Uh, um, I was I was very, very concerned about what it was that I was eating.
Definitely.
It wasn't about just what to avoid. The paleo diet is about what to take out. I was much more into, okay, so what is it that I need to be eating?
Right. So, what were some of the nutrients you were chasing in the leafy greens, the liver, the oysters, and the
So
shellfish that you thought were critically important for your healing?
so in the greens, lutein, zeaxanthin, mesozeaxanthin, uh, uh, um, vitamin K, uh, um, calcium, magnesium, but all of those carotenoids, and then you get a fair amount of folate in there as well.
Hmm.
You get a bunch of the B vitamins. You don't get any cobalamin. If you go into the liver, you're going to get cobalamin, B12. You'll get all these minerals that you can easily absorb from meat that you can't so easily absorb from your plant materials.
Hmm.
And if you look at, so you don't have as much vitamin C. You got to get your vitamin C from raw vegetables and fruits.
Hmm.
Your B vitamins you can get from liver.
Hmm.
Yeah, you're also going to get carnitines.
Hmm.
You'll get some sulfur amino acids as well. It's a pretty good source of zinc,
Hmm.
manganese. I was because I was very focused on grass fed, grass finished. I was also getting a better ratio of omega-3 fats, omega-6 fats
Hmm.
as well.
So, looking at this nutrient dense diet, I really feel like when you're picking liver and oysters and shellfish and pasture raised proteins, they're multivitamins in their own right.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
so what is day in the life of you look like right now,
Well,
maintaining this nutrient density and meditating and moving your body? Can you talk about the flow of your day and the foods that you're eating meal to
well,
meal?
before I do that, I want to make the comment that the first 4 years of my recovery, I had an enormous need for greens.
Mhm.
I was probably having 6 cups of kale, collards, spinach, uh, um, romaine lettuce every day.
Mhm.
It's measured raw, so 2 big platefuls of salads every
Mhm.
day. And I was now well enough that I could travel to give lectures, attend scientific meetings. And I discovered 36 hours away from my food, I could tell the cognitive decline.
Wow.
So it's like, wow, this is really interesting. So I was sort of the connoisseur of uh, um, powdered greens to take with me because I just couldn't tolerate being away from my greens.
Wow.
4 years into my recovery, then I could.
Mhm.
So what was that about? Was my brain just severely low on vitamin K? which we now know is involved in stem cells, BDNF, oligodendrocytes. Maybe. I don't think the vitamin K story is fully understood, but that certainly was part of it.
Mhm.
Was it all the carotenoids that we know that they do great things for your eyeballs and for your brain cells? Maybe.
Mhm.
We know that I have a bunch of aunts who have severe macular degeneration, became blind, and they were blind by my age, and beginning to have cognitive decline. And that I probably share some of those genes, and my ophthalmologist says that I have, yeah, I don't remember the ophthalmology term for some early signs that would put me at risk for macular degeneration. And they've been watching it now for several years. Nothing's changing. He goes, well, you are clearly doing well. You're at risk. Your family history says you're at risk, but your Wahls diet is clearly doing a great job for that macular degeneration. And we have many more millions of people with macular degeneration than we have with MS, by the way. So,
No, it's actually something that my grandfather had, and then my dad and his 8 brothers and sisters are at risk of, and it's something that's shown up on my genetic profile as well.
oh man, are you following the Wahls diet, my friend?
Pretty close. I mean, I love my Force of Nature ancestral blends, and I love leafy greens. I talk
Yeah,
about that
keep those
being a
greens coming, girl.
staple in your diet. So I'm catching up to you in nutrient
Okay.
density. I got to get my family on board with the oysters, and then we're good to go.
Oh yeah, I mean oysters are well. Uh, so my diet has evolved. I think I probably replenished my deficits for carotenoids and my omega-3 deficit and B vitamin deficit over the first 4 years. And I was very, very sensitive. I had to travel with my food because if I couldn't get I could tell cognitively
Hmm.
at 36 hours that things were slipping.
Hmm.
So we would travel with my food. Now, over time, I have been able to reduce my carbs. I still have, and we should also note that I'm older. Instead of being 52, I'm now 67.
Hmm.
And so now my protein requirement is higher because
Hmm.
I'm older. I got to protect those muscles. So I have a higher I'm on the higher protein diet, and I'm much more careful that when I'm eating my greens, my sulfur rich, and my colors, that I'm doing it in a relatively lower carbohydrate fashion. So
Hmm.
I'm not having as many um, yams, squashes, root vegetables. I'll still
Hmm.
have them. I'll have them raw, but I lean more into non-starchy.
Got it.
And I do fasting strategies. Over when I began my journey, I was not doing fasting strategies.
Hmm.
And became more aware of the benefits of metabolic flexibility, of being in the fasted state, in the refed state. And so for a couple of years, I would once a month do a water fast for 5 to 7 days. And you're pretty darn hungry
Yeah,
by the fifth.
you're putting Dr. Longo to shame over there.
You're pretty hungry by the fifth and seventh
Yeah.
day. Now, as I got, and I was releasing a lot of stem cells.
Hmm.
So when people talk about stem cell transplants, my response is, grow your own, folks. Grow your
Yeah.
own. Take care of them. Have great nutrition. Have some periodic fasts, and you could do that with a water fast, 3 to 7 days. However, if you go longer than 3 days, you're going to be eating up some of your muscle. And the
Hmm.
older you get, that's a bigger problem.
Hmm.
So that is a reason, maybe if you're going to do water fast, limit it to 3 days, or to do Dr. Longo's method, which is calorie restrict
Hmm.
for 3 to 7 days.
Hmm.
People can do a 3-day calorie restriction pretty well. You're pretty hungry by day 4, you're pretty hungry by day 5, and you're downright cross by day 7.
Right.
In his trials, what his team tells me is, um, though the physiology is better with doing a 7-day, people just can't sustain it.
Right.
And so a 3 to 5 day is much more sustainable.
Definitely. So when it comes to fasting strategies, metabolic flexibility, were you focusing on these because of the mitochondrial benefits?
Mitochondria. So
Yeah.
I think mitochondria and I think stem cells.
Okay. And so,
So I for a couple of years, 2 years, I did that water fasting routine. Then I did Walt Longo's routine. I think for 18 months, 5 days every month, and then the pandemic happened, and I thought, hmm, I don't want to stress my immune cells when the pandemic is going on. So
Mhm.
then I switched to eating every other day. And yeah, and that's pretty much what I do is I eat every other day. And so today I have a very simple 24-hour dietary recall. It's known as green tea and water.
Wow. And and so when you're having green tea and water only for the days where you're not eating,
Yes,
um, when you do feed the following day, what does that protein in dietary intake look like so that you aren't having
my
you're getting the
sarcopenia.
benefits, but
Yeah,
but
yeah.
not losing muscle mass?
So I want to be sure that I have plenty of, and so it's a very entertaining meal when we have. So we might have, my son and his wife come over, my daughter's there, Jackie's there. And so we'll have perhaps a stew, a chili. We had a really lovely Indian meal with ground bison and a number of, um, there was kale, mushrooms, onions. We had put a yam in there, a turnip in there, lots of mushrooms. And a the base was a very nice collagen bone broth that made from scratch. So filled up the Instant Pot, cooked it on low for the day. We come over. My family they have we have these beautiful bowls, probably hold, oh, I don't know, three cups of stew very comfortably. So my family, they all have one bowl of stew, and they're done. I have three,
There you
maybe
go.
two bowls, because and I warn everyone that I'm gonna eat, probably 2 times what you're eating, maybe 3 times what you're eating, but keep in mind, I'm only eating every other day,
Mhm.
so you can just continue the conversation while I continue to eat.
Yeah, I think that the stress on the body, the refeeding phase needs to be taken seriously when you're using fasting strategies.
And the magic isn't the fast, the magic is the refeed, because the refeed is when I am rebuilding my stem cells, rebuilding my immune cells, uh, rebuilding those mitochondria and those other organelles that I ate up the day before.
Right, right,
And so I got to have the parts.
right. It's amazing to me the work that you've done in this space. And, you are an N of one, but your Wahls protocol has impacted and influenced so many people's lives that have suffered with MS. And I know that it changed the trajectory of your career and the studies that you were interested in and your
Yeah.
clinical research. So can we talk about a little bit about how your path changed, how your
Yeah.
colleagues took these big changes,
Oh,
and
yeah.
what you're most excited about?
You know, it was, I was a member of the Institutional Review Board at that time, and they'd seen me for years in my tilt recline wheelchair, for 4 years, as a matter of fact. And fortunately, I'd been doing that. That got me really comfortable reading the research, getting more comfortable with experimenting on myself. And so they were like all just stunned when I walked into my IRB meeting, and they're like, "Oh my God, you're walking!" I said, "Oh yeah, yeah, I'm walking now." And my chair of medicine had directed me to get a case report written up on myself with my treating physician and physical therapist. I did that. And they called me back and said, I want you to do a safety and feasibility trial. And I said, like, I don't know how to do those things because I studied diagnostic area. It goes, I'll get you the mentors. This is your assignment. Okay. And so it took me about a year to get the protocol written up. And we submitted it to the IRB. The IRB disapproved the study. They said, there's no safety data other than you.
Oh my gosh.
And my chair of medicine had become the dean of medicine. And he wanted my study to happen. So he called the chair of the IRB and said, you work with Dr. Wahls to address all the safety concerns. This is an important study because what she wants to know is, will people do what she did? Does anyone get hurt?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the effect size?
Mm-hmm.
So then I met with the various people I needed to meet. We addressed the safety concerns, resubmitted it, and it was ultimately approved. The folks in Canada with Direct MS Charity gave me a little bit of pilot money to get it started, tiny amount, $50,000. The device company, DJO, gave us the devices that we used. We had to return them when we were done. And Warren Darling had a postdoc, had a PhD student, Babita Bist, who decided that she would use my study data as her dissertation. So she helped me run the study. My chief of staff at the university, my chairman at the VA, agreed to give me the time, a couple days a week, to go do the study visits. So I got a lot of support from folks, and we ran that first study. And now that's all happening in 2010. I should tell you, in 2008 and 9, when I was changing how I was practicing medicine, I'm focusing on diet and some supplements, my partners filed a complaint against me. And my chief of staff in the MS Society banned me as a speaker because my ideas were dangerous. So I got called in to go meet with my chair of medicine, called in to go meet with the chief of staff at the VA, and had to explain myself. And fortunately, I'd been sort of prepared for this. I brought with me, a handful of scientific papers, and I went through them. And the response is, you can't be pissing people off, Terry. You're going to lose your license. So you need to learn how to talk about this in a way that doesn't upset people and will not put your license in jeopardy in the medical record. So then I got sent to go shadow Dr. Nisley in the complementary alternative medicine clinic. And like, oh my God, I am so grateful that this happened, because then I learned how to talk about this in the medical record, how to talk about it more carefully in the public space in a way that was much more comfortable for everyone to hear. And I became much more clear to say, I am not treating your disease. I'm working on improving your health and your physiology. And then I will monitor your blood pressure, your blood sugar, and your pain, and we'll adjust your medication so you're not over medicated. Now, that was a message my colleagues were comfortable with. That was a message that patients understood. And that was so everybody was a whole lot happier. And now that people are happier, so I had to do all that in 2008, 2009. And then towards the end of 2009, I made everyone much more comfortable with what I was doing. That's when Paul Rothman said, I really want you to do a clinical trial. Because if I had not repaired all those relationships, that trial would have never happened.
Wow. And that just fires me up so much, because as trailblazers like you that are in pain, going through degeneration, wanting to heal, you went to school for medicine, you want to be able to take care of people from the root cause. But the way that the education goes, there's a lot of money behind these large drug trials and these quick fixes that and I'd love to get your take on that at the end of the podcast of what's coming out with MS and how you feel about it. But it's just, there are so many things at our disposal that we can be doing every day. And to have to like walk through political landmines and...
Kelly, I'm fine with all of this. It all need to unfold exactly this way. And I'll make the observation that any new idea meets enormous resistance. You and I, we have our understanding of the world. And if we get new information that doesn't fit with our understanding of the world, we ignore it for a long time.
Right.
Because we're busy. There's a lot going on. And, I got the kids to take care of, the dogs to take care of. And I just can't take on a new concept right now.
Yeah.
Eventually, there's enough evidence, like, well, maybe I got to look at that again.
Yeah.
And so, that's the innovator. People hate you. You can't get your work published. You're an idiot. You're all sorts of terrible things.
Right.
And then you finally, it was incredibly hard to get that first study published. It took us 2 years to find a journal to publish it. It was so radical. But once you get the first one in, then you can get another one in, and then another one. And then you start the earlier work, and then you get more studies that are going. You cite the earlier work, cite those studies, and you build. So now I think we're up to 26 scientific peer-reviewed MS-related publications that we've put out. We've had 7 clinical trials. I'm doing my 8th clinical trial. And so our first study was in this almost throwaway, very, very, very tiny impact journal. Tiny, tiny. My postdoc, Dr. Tyler Titcomb, analyzed all of the dietary intervention studies that have been randomized to date. I think there were 12. And he summarized all that and submitted it to Neurology, the highest impact journal that talks about MS, and it was accepted. It's going to be coming out January 24th with accompanying editorial.
Congratulations.
That makes the observation that food really matters.
Oh, wow.
And we'll have, a number of very helpful recommendations. Now, is there more work to do? Could they have made further recommendations than got made? Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And we're continuing to do those trials. If you're going to change clinical practice, it is a 20-year process, maybe even a 30-year process. And I'm in, let's see, year 15.
Yeah.
And now we have editorials. Now we have, I think, 160 citations of my first paper. That's pretty cool.
That is really cool. Because it's that initial work that there's always someone that has to do it. They have to be the trailblazer. They have to figure out how to get people on board to do the studies, and then it starts spreading.
Absolutely, you have to have mentors and people who support you. You have to have a thick hide. You have to be willing to be criticized, to be ridiculed. In the day of the internet, I have so many folks who said I never had MS, my physicians were incompetent, that I'm a liar, I'm a cheat, and all these terrible things, which I could ignore. My family was a bit more distressed than I was. And I'm like, I just feel a moral obligation to keep doing my work and to go talk where people want to have me, so I can let people know that there's reason to be hope and to do all that you can. And if you want to wait for the double-blind, randomized controlled trials before you make any diet and lifestyle changes, you can. But if you think vegetables are pretty safe, if you think meditation is pretty safe, if you think working with a physical therapist is pretty safe, if you think adding electrical stimulation to support your exercise is pretty safe, you can start doing those things now while you're waiting for me to build the research.
Right. Right. And I think that's the key here, is that it isn't, for me, it all feels safe. all of the MS or not, the recommendations that you're making add nutrient density and vitality to people's lives. And that for a lot of people, it's exchanging one food for another, and it's paying your farmer instead of your physician or the drug companies.
So the pharmacist, yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes
it's a
to
process.
it is, and I feel like a lot of people who are in pain and maybe at that place that you were at where you were praying for it to be fatal, or you were not thinking about the future. There's a lot of people in that space, and the drug options and the future drug options are beacons of hope for them. Can you talk about some of the new ones that are coming out? And I know that there are remyelination drugs in development right now.
So let me talk about. So the drugs are really great for turning off inflammation. Mm-hmm. And if people are having a lot of a high number of relapses, a high number of enhancing lesions on their brain, clinically, I'm sure their treating medical team will want them to take drugs to turn off that inflammation. Mm-hmm. And if you were coming to see me, I would be supporting that conversation. I would also remind you that you want to address the degeneration part, and that is through diet and lifestyle, and we would help you with that. And I stress very much that you work with your treating specialist to treat the disease. Mm-hmm. By all means, work with them according to what your comfort is with your risk of disability and your risk of adverse events from the drugs. Mm-hmm. I will work with you on improving the health of your cells and your overall health by addressing the environmental factors. And the two tracks are mutually supportive. Mm-hmm. And it's a very personal decision how much risk you're willing to take of those adverse events from the drugs and how much risk for disability progression you want to take from not taking drugs. And that's a conversation that you need to have with the person who prescribes the drugs, not me. I can have Okay, I'll turn my camera on and off and see if that helps.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay, so you have the conversation about the drugs, risk and benefits with the person who would prescribe the drugs. You have the conversation about the wellness strategies to help your physiology with me, and that's what I help. And, I have some lab tests that I can assess your nutrient levels, toxin levels, your environmental factors, so we can really fine tune and address those. And your prescribing physician will monitor disease activity with your probably MRIs and some other lab tests to sort out how aggressive they'll encourage you to be with your drugs. They're not mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. And I do have people who are more fearful of the adverse events because it's hard to read those adverse events when they list death mm-hmm. as one of the risks and not be fearful of that. Mm-hmm. And the drugs will tell you those risks in detail. The physicians are worried about the risk of becoming bedridden, demented, job loss, and that's why they're pushing those drugs. Mm-hmm. However, we certainly have people who are reluctant to take the drugs come work with us, and they get pretty clear feedback within a couple of months that the diet and lifestyle is turning off disease activity and they're doing great, mm-hmm. or that disease activity is still going on and they should add in the drugs in addition to diet and lifestyle.
I love that progression of like giving it a solid effort with diet and lifestyle just to see what your body and how your body would respond to that first.
Right. So many people will find that within 3 months, they have a dramatic improvement in quality of life, energy, fatigue is down. And when they go in for their MRIs, which they're getting every 6 months, the physician is like, well,
what are you doing?
There are no enhancing lesions. Things look great. Keep it up. And sometimes the response is, you're doing great clinically, but you have 3 new lesions. I really want you to be on the drugs. And then the person has to sort out, do they want to give what they do with that information? Yeah, I think 3 or less. 1 or 2 is probably not a big deal. 3 to 4, a little bigger deal. More than 5, that's really very active disease. 10, very, very active. And so the more new lesions you have, the higher my level of concern that because statistically you're at a um, greater probability of sooner time to conversion to wheelchair and bedridden state. So
Right.
that's what drives everyone's concern about maybe you should take the drugs.
Right.
It is not mutually exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine to decide, you know what, I don't have that many lesions, I don't have that much disability. I'll hold on the drugs and do diet and lifestyle and get my next MRI and then decide. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's an okay decision. You got 10 lesions, I'll see you either way. You need to know, I'm going to tell you, if it was my brain, I would take the drugs. And
Mm-hmm.
then I would probably go with something like Ocrevus,
Mm-hmm.
1 infusion, and then decide with my next MRI, would I take another infusion or are things quiet now and I'm good. The other thing I would do is I would go see a functional medicine trained neurologist like Ken Sharlin, who's in Springfield, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I work very closely together. So that's certainly if you have a more aggressive version of your MS. And if you have more lesions, if you have more than 3, certainly if you have more than 5 or 10, if you're in my practice, we want to be getting a full functional medicine workup. Like, okay, we got to be aggressive for you because your brain's telling us that we need aggressive health. So I want to know your microbiome. I want to know your vitamin levels. I want to know your food sensitivity issues so we can address all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll probably still encourage you to think about one round of some type of disease modifying drug treatment because I don't want your brain to have to suffer from all of those enhancing lesions. But I'd
Right.
be very optimistic that that's not a long-term consequence need for you.
Right. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing these resources in regards to the infusions you like, the physicians you trust, and your opinion if someone were to come with you based on their lesion number. How can someone become a patient of yours?
Well, so if you go to terwalls.com, we do have a link because I do have a handful of patients that I see in the Wahls Institute. And so, yes, um, so if you really want to come, what we do, that capability does exist. We also have some online programs that are really very helpful. There is a really wonderful course that we've got, remyelination. And I talk about the biology of making myelin, how it happens, how it can go wrong. I talk about these exciting new drugs that are in development. I talk about the natural products that also work well in mice. Then I explain why things that work really well in mice seem to not work so well in humans. Why is that? What could we do about it? What can we learn? Then I talk about the microglia, what pisses them off and makes them wreck our brain and wreck our myelin, how we make them happy. So that's the basic remyelination course. Then we have the advanced remyelination course. And that is where, after I get you all fired up for that, yes, there's things you can do, but changing our habits is really hard work. It is so hard. So then we talk about how to understand your health journey. We do a timeline review, a health line review. We talk about how to grow your motivation to do the work because that's not easy. Then we uh, will also talk about how to assess your progress using some validated survey things and some validated measures of that that you can do with the help that you can either measure yourself or with the help of another adult or at least teenager in your room that could measure so you could see your progress. because what we measure and track, we tend to improve. So we give people, we have 2 courses, sort of the remyelination and then the remyelination advanced. They're online, they're virtual, they are just fabulous because the remyelination drugs are going to work very well in mice. I predict that they'll have a very tiny, statistically significant but clinically irrelevant consequence in people because we're way more complicated than a lab rat.
Mm-hmm.
We get to eat what we want. We get to move around. We get to have sex. We get to see our friends. We do lots of things that those poor lab mice never get to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I talk about that, but I talk about, there's all the stuff we can do.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll explain what you can do and then help you know how to do it. So the remyelination course, you got to get. So if you can't come see me, do the remyelination course. It'll be transformative. And then the other thing you can do is come be in our clinical trial. We have this amazing clinical trial, efficacy of diet and quality of life. It will be the largest, longest dietary intervention studies that have been done in the setting of MS. You have to have relapse remitting MS between age 18 and 70.
Mm-hmm.
You have to come to Iowa City at month 0, month 3, and month 24. We'll get some blood work, some walking, hand function, vision function, and thinking test. That these are clinical tests. And then we'll do a research MRI. That lets us see how many enhancing lesions you have and how big your brain is. And then we'll repeat that at month 24.
Wow.
So our primary outcome is, can we improve quality of life? And then the secondary outcomes have to do with what impact is on those clinical markers. And then, Kelly, because people with MS, our brains are shrinking.
Mm-hmm.
And our brains start shrinking at age 12.
Mm-hmm.
Shocking.
Oh my gosh.
It doesn't start shrinking much until about age 40. Then after 40, the shrink increases a bit more. And healthy aging is about 1.1 to 0.3% per year. If you have MS, it's 1% per year. That's pretty terrible.
Mm-hmm.
That is like really, really terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And the drugs turn off the inflammation, but they don't stop the rapid shrink, which is why cognitive decline is such a big issue for people with MS.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's one of my hypotheses, and I'm very excited about this one, is that by helping people fix their diet, we can get the rated brain volume loss back to healthy aging. So we don't know that. That's my hypothesis. That's what we're going to be testing. We'll have 3 diets: the paleo diet, which is basically the Wahls diet, my original diet; the olive oil, time-restricted ketogenic diet, and usual diet. And we'll give tips every month to the usual diet on how to eat less junk, eat more non-starchy vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that people, when they sign up to be in a research study that involves food, they did that because they want to improve their diet.
Yeah,
So
they already want to eat clean.
We know that the usual care group is going to improve their diet. And we're going to give them tips so they could do that. So it's quite possible that all 3 groups will improve. And I think all 3
I'm
groups
sure they will.
improve.
Yeah.
They will improve. Will I be able to show a difference between the 2 intervention groups and the usual diet control? We don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Will all 3 groups have their brain volume be better than the usual brain volume loss that occurs in MS studies? Yeah, I think so. And the question that I think is most compelling is, can we get all 3 groups to healthy aging? Can I get just one group to healthy aging? I don't know, but if I can get any of them to healthy aging, that will be a blockbuster finding because there's no drug that can do that yet.
My money's on the Wahls protocol.
Yeah, we're going to find out.
Oh, Dr. Wahls, it was such a pleasure to have you on the show today, telling your story. empowering and sharing your message of hope with people with MS, explaining MS for anyone listening who has a friend or family member or a neighbor that has this degenerative disease. Please pass this podcast on to them. Share Dr. Terry's book with them. If you want to take it to the next level, check out Remyelination, her course, or the advanced version as well, to really get those habits in check. I mean, you have given the world so many resources in taking care of themselves through diet and lifestyle that have massive impact on their ability to ride a bike around a block, to do the work that you're doing. And it gives me the chills. It makes me emotional. I really can't thank you for the unending work that you've done over the last 15 years and for sharing your time with me today.
Thank you. And I'll make sure you have all those links. One more pitch I'll put out there, Kelly. People should follow me on Instagram, Dr. Terry Wahls, because that way you get to see what I'm eating and what I'm doing. And people always keep asking, what do I have for breakfast? And I keep saying, nothing, water, tea.
Yeah. No, you are a great follow on Instagram. I've been over on your Instagram for a number of years, and it's been fun to follow along. So thank you for really sharing in all the spaces so people can find you and learn more. I'll put your Instagram handle, your website, your books, everything in the show notes, and we'll get your trial and your courses linked there as well.
Great. Thank you much, Kelly.
Thank you.